I want to read you the statement that came out today from former President Obama. The fact that this could happen even as the city of Minneapolis is going through the trial of Derek Chauvin and reliving the heart-wrenching murder of George Floyd indicates not just how important it is to conduct a full and transparent investigation, but also just how badly we need to reimagine policing and public safety in this country. If that point seems familiar to our viewers, our guest just made it seconds ago. And Wes, the question is, what does Biden need to do on a policy, public education standpoint that perhaps the duo Obama-Biden was unable to do during their time?
Certainly. It is a remarkable statement from President Obama, who had to, when he was in office, really walk a tightrope on these issues, to the frustration of many of the activists and to, frankly, many Black Americans who thought that he had to pull his punches a bit because, as happened time and time again, when he would wade in, it would be demagogued and there would be such backlash from the right. You can think of the Skip Gates incident and the Trayvon Martin incident, where for saying things as straightforward as, if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon Martin, President Obama was almost run out of office by congressional Republicans, or at least they made it sound like they were willing to. In this case, it's going to be really interesting and really, I'm very interested to watch and see what the Biden administration does. As the earlier guests were noting, if they can get them confirmed, they've got people like Kristen Clark and Vanita Gupta who are veterans of this space, who know these issues like the back of their hand, who frankly have great track records, not just with activists and reformers, but with the police themselves, as people who are willing to work on these issues. But what's difficult here, I believe the Biden administration and their officials, when they say they care about these issues, that this is a top priority for them. What is difficult here is that in the United States of America, policing is a local and state government issue. It's not an issue in which the Department of Justice or the presidency and the White House can just come in a swooping piece of legislation, change how policing works in America. We have 18,000 police departments, many of whom operate as relatively independent local militias. It's weird to think of them that way, but that's what it is in reality. They report to their police chief and then to whoever hires them, be it a city council or a mayor. They have state laws they report to, but those vary, 50 different sets of laws. And the feds do have limited power in terms of what their real oversight is. And even the conversations that have been had, whether it be about the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act or other congressional potential fixes, are things that when you dive in, actually, while they take steps many people would like to see in policing, do not reimagine policing in a fundamental and foundational way. And so what's going to be interesting here is if the Biden administration can find a way to put their foot on the scale to facilitate, I don't want to say a national conversation because we've been down that road many times, but to facilitate a type of change across these departments in localities, which is how this has to happen. The other thing that I think is worth noting, and I think I mentioned this loosely in that Atlantic piece you referenced from last year, was that following Rodney King, one of the things that the Congress did is it gave itself and gave the Department of Justice more power to oversee police. And so when you see these investigations that are launched, post-Ferguson, post-Eric Gardner, in Minneapolis, the patterns and practices investigations that people like Vanita Gupta were experts at and led, that power didn't exist until post-Rodney King, where the feds gave themselves more power to oversee the police. One thing that hasn't been discussed, at least not publicly very much, but that might end up being on the table, is does Congress, especially democratically controlled Congress, grant itself, or the executive, the Department of Justice, more oversight of local policing, which might add new tools to their toolbox to help reform some of these issues that come up time and time again. The one thing I always note is that even when it's not in the headlines and we're not paying attention to it, the work of myself and my colleagues at the Washington Post to still keep the Fatal Force database going finds that 3 people are shot and killed by the police every single day, whether they make the headlines or they don't. But this is something that is always present in our society. And so therefore, something that, again, even when it's not the political issue of the moment, even when a street is not on fire, this is something that's happening and affecting American families.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.